Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We start the fifth panel of the conference now. May I ask the participants in the fifth panel to please join me up here, please. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Minister and his colleagues who organized this conference, and it's a great privilege for me to be moderating this session. This fifth panel is allocated to the discussion of smart and green economy. The pandemic that hit us was brought about crisis like no other, as IMF put it. The massive disruption in life and livelihood, and governments had to act. The EU growth strategy was an example of this action on a multi-national scale, but all countries and all governments had their own policy to deal with the impact of the pandemic. But two elements, the pandemic created the opportunity for two policies that had been lurking in the background for many years, the green agenda and the digitalization agenda. In fact, the EU Green Deal and the digitalization agenda are two elements of the EU growth strategy. And of course, we have a distinguished panel here with the ministers who are in charge of these areas, as well as representatives of international institutions who are partners and supporters of the North Macedonian government in this. I would like just to mention one point. One of the major outcomes of the crisis was the widening inequality and increased poverty across the world and in individual countries, well established. And the policies that have been promoted now come under not only growth, but also sharing prosperity, reduction in poverty. Almost all governments have these somewhere in their agendas. And especially in the second part of the discussion, I would like to ask participants to comment on this point. But without further ado, we start with our discussions. Our first participant is Commissioner Gentiloni, who unfortunately is not here, could not be here, but he has sent a video recording. We should have it soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me start this intervention by stressing that the Commission strongly supports the official launch of accession negotiation with North Macedonia. I hope Member States reach an agreement on the negotiation framework in view of holding the first intergovernmental conference as soon as possible. And I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to address this conference and congratulate Minister Besimi for hosting it and for having a panel that relates to two of the top priorities of the European Commission, referred to as the twin transitions, the green one set to materialize through the Green Deal and the digital one. Europe is one of the front-runners on the pathway towards a climate-neutral and resource-efficient economy. It is our goal, as you know, to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. We have stepped up our ambitions this year towards reducing already by 2030 the CO2 emissions level by 55% as compared to 1990 levels. This strategy is the cornerstone of what we call the European Green Deal, which is the new EU growth strategy. stepping up our ambitions for emissions reduction by 2030 required changes in the respective legislation. And this concern, inter alia, climate, energy and fuels, transport, buildings, and land use and forestry. This is the focus of the so-called Fit for 55 package, put forward by the Commission on July the 14th. The emission trading system is the core instrument for this ambition. The Commission is proposing to increase the environmental contribution of the ETS by reducing the emissions cap and by extending its sectoral coverage, including aviation, maritime and road transport, and buildings. As a stronger ETS may lead to an increase in carbon price differences with the EU trading partners, there is an increased risk of carbon leakage. Therefore, the Commission is proposing to create a carbon border adjustment mechanism. This mechanism aims to prevent an increase in global emissions from EU products being replaced by more carbon-intensive imports, or EU companies moving their production abroad as our emissions requirements become tighter. It is a tool to make sure that our climate actions are not undermined. Looking at this region's exports, electricity is crucial for Western Balkans countries who have engaged in coupling their electricity grid with the EU one. For this reason, we have included special rules to grant temporary and time-limited exemptions to third countries once their market is coupled with the EU. Let me give you an insight of the measures that the EU has taken to support the economic recovery and how they also contribute to addressing the longer-term green and digital challenges we face. To support member states' recovery efforts, we adopted, as you know, an unprecedented recovery package. To tap into recovery funds, member states have to prepare recovery and resilience plans with a strong focus on reforms and investment supporting the climate and digital transitions. We are convinced that digital technologies can accelerate the impact of policies dealing with climate change and environment protection. This also requires barriers to be addressed, for instance, through public administration reforms aimed to removing investment barriers encountered in mobile telecommunication networks, measures aimed at accelerating the digitalization of SMEs. But governments also have a crucial role in directly investing in areas in which the private sector is unable or unwilling to do so. In view of these large investment needs, public authorities should explore all funding opportunities, including public-private partnership, even if they are not a catch-all solution for infrastructural investment. Top priorities for the Commission, the green and digital transition, will constitute also an important part of the policy dialogue between candidate countries and the EU. The EU supports their transition through many projects. The 2019 Economic and Investment Plan for the Western Balkans promotes a green and digital approach to development challenges specific to the Western Balkans, but similar to that of the EU itself. This includes infrastructure investments in sustainable transport and clean energy, and proposal to better protect the environment, reduce carbon dioxide emissions, and support the transition to a more sustainable energy mix. I'm very pleased to note how the strategic framework of North Macedonia is fully aligned with the strategic priorities of the Economic Investment Plan. And more can be done. This relates in particular to improving energy efficiency in building, promoting the distribution of natural gas as an intermediate step in the decarbonization process, advancing on regional interconnectivity in gas distribution, and investing in renewable energy sources. In the digital area, increasing access to broadband, expanding available e-government services, and developing digital skills are just some of the key challenges which your country faces. The need for bolstering the green and digital transition comes on top of an already vast agenda of structural reforms in the pipeline. North Macedonia was a frontrunner in the implementation of last year's policy guidance adopted in the economic and financial dialogue between the EU and the Western Balkans and Turkey. North Macedonia has made steady progress and needs to continue to deliver on EU-related reform. As an example, only recently the prompt implementation of reforms required under the EU macro-financial assistance led to a swift disbursement of the second and final tranche. The ERP is a suitable strategic instrument to guide the post-COVID recovery onto a green and digital path. It should help your country in shifting towards a sustainable and inclusive economic model, enabled by the wider uptake of digital and clean technologies. The Commission services, in their assessment, will focus increasingly on the coherence between the RRP's structural measures and the priorities of the EU Green Deal and the digital strategy. The Commission's assessment and the implementation of the jointly agreed structural reform priorities can help guide your policy towards more growth and more resilience to external shocks, such as COVID-19, and create an environment for the implementation of the economic and investment plan. So I wish you a successful conference and look forward to continued cooperation. Thank you.
Great. Our next speaker, Mr. Paul Hilbers, is also unfortunately unable to be here, but he is on Zoom. And welcome, Mr. Hilbers. You have 5-6 minutes to do your presentation, please. You're welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Mr. Hashi?
Yes. Yes.
Good. Well, let me first thank you very much, all of you, for inviting me to this first annual conference on the economic recovery beyond COVID. The economic recovery is at the top of our minds and should be, and I'm very pleased to see that climate and digitalization are still our top agenda items. These topics could easily be put on the back burner in fighting the current crisis, but that would be a mistake. Albeit with a more slow-burning character, climate change is a crisis with an economic impact in the years to come. In designing policies beyond COVID, climate-related risks could be addressed at once. And that is exactly the reason I think greening the economy should be the top priority of policymakers just now. And the same is true for the second topic, digitalization, that has proven to be part of the solution for countries in lockdown. Of course, digitalization comes with risks that need to be monitored and potentially regulated, but with these risks mitigated, digitalization is indeed the future. It's my pleasure to participate in a panel with national policymakers, ministers, and as well as representatives of different international organizations, because I believe global challenges like these demand efforts at all levels. Only with the necessary coordination between countries on national and international levels, we can make this a success story. Therefore, we have to put the topic of climate change and digitalization on the top of our priority list at our IMF constituency as well. As recently as July, the Executive Board of the IMF, of which I'm a member, discussed a new climate strategy to help members address climate-related policy challenges. Importantly, the paper clearly sets out the significant macroeconomic and financial implications of climate change for every member country, ranging from negative impacts on growth prospects and fiscal costs to financial stability issues and monetary policy implications. Essentially, the strategy can be broken down into three main areas. First, the fund aims to significantly step up its country-specific advice on climate-related policies through its existing surveillance network. Climate risk analysis and stress tests will also feature in the IMF's deep dives into financial centers, known as FSAPs, the Financial Sector Assessment Program. Second, the IMF seeks to scale up its offer of technical assistance on climate-related aspects of economic, fiscal, and financial policies. And third, and finally, the IMF will become increasingly active on collecting data that lies at the intersection of climate and macroeconomic analysis. In this area, the IMF has already launched a publicly available climate change indicators dashboard, which I invite you to check out. The IMF also recognizes its critical role in digitalization, the second topic of the conference. The fund has especially a role to play in digital money, given its mandate to ensure the stability of the international monetary system. Together with other international financial institutions and standard setters, the fund aims to help its members in harnessing the benefits and managing the risks of digital money. And that is exactly the reason the Executive Board has also recently adopted a strategy to continue delivering on the fund's mandate in this area. In the first place, the fund will focus on the development of analytical frameworks. My view is that the fund has especially a lot of value to add in analyzing the cross-border and global aspects of potentially new digital money. It's also currently piloting the coverage of this issue in bilateral fund surveillance, and countries that need it most can be assured that the fund will provide them with timely advice and assistance in supervising the digital financial industry and calibrating the role of central banks in this area. Let me now just briefly mention a few points about the important North Macedonian actions and policies in these areas. First of all, Minister Noureddini set a very ambitious and important goal with the revised national contribution to the Paris Agreement, committing the country to a 51% reduction in greenhouse emissions by 2030 compared to 1990. In this regard, the amendment of the Central Bank's strategic plan is well noted, as well as their recent participation in the network for greening of the financial sector. This strategic plan establishes procedures and policies for climate change risk management, I understand, as well as analyses on climate change risk implications for the banking sector. The increase in the domestic bank's green loan portfolio is also noteworthy. And we are informed that the National Bank, headed by Governor Anita Angelowska-Brzozowska, considers the possibility of supporting green finance by using monetary instruments like reserve requirements. This can help to provide greater credit support to the projects that would have a positive impact on the environment. Similarly, the plan of the Ministry of Finance to introduce green bonds envisaged in the public debt strategy is clearly also a step forward. And also in the area of digitalization, we see significant steps being undertaken by the authorities. Supported by the European Fund for Southeast Europe, the Central Bank has initiated several projects aimed at raising awareness of innovative technologies in finance and thereby supporting innovation since 2018 already. Their survey for the ecosystem mapping showed that there can be benefits from digitalization of the financial sector in North Macedonia. And I very much welcome the publication of the FinTech Development Feasibility Study earlier this year and positively note the openness for FinTech competition envisaged in the draft law on the payment system. The digitalization projects led by the Ministry for Information Society and Administration and the Ministry for Agriculture and Forestry are also improving transparency and quality of services for citizens. Similarly, I support the digitalization of public administration, and I'm pleased to hear the technical assistance from the fund in the area of customs administration and public revenue office is of value here. Let me therefore conclude this round by commending the authorities on their significant efforts in these two important areas. I'm eager to hear more on recent policies and also on the current policy challenges from the other panelists coming from different ministries. But it is already clear to me that North Macedonia has put green finance and digitalization high on the agenda. Tomorrow, we'll celebrate North Macedonia's 30 years of independence, and in that spirit, it is very well placed to commend the authorities and the country for their efforts to keep ahead of the curve in these new but very important areas of economic and financial development. And let me therefore once more emphasize the value of our cooperation, and my hope is that this cooperation will keep contributing to the country's prosperity. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herberts. Much appreciated. Great. If you'd like to stay with us, please do so. I don't know that you probably have other commitments, but it would be good if you stay. Colleagues, as I mentioned earlier, we are running a little late, so I would appreciate if you could limit your first intervention to 5 minutes, please. We start with Mr. Massimiliano Paolucci, who is World Bank Country Manager for Kosovo and North Macedonia. And floor is yours, Mr. Paolucci.
Thank you very much, Professor, and let me thank also Mr. Bersimi for inviting us and for organizing this first and foremost and inviting us to this important event. So I'll try to be in the 5 minutes and deliver a couple of messages about the role of the international institutions in accompanying the green and digital investments and revolution, if you wish, and also focus a bit on the issue of inclusion that you mentioned in your opening remarks. So yesterday and today, we've heard over and over that with crisis come opportunities. And right now, the opportunity that we have is basically to change the development pattern that we are on. If I look at 2050, I see a planet inhabited by 10 billion people, a planet where the consumption of energy, the consumption of water, goes up by 50, 30, 40% in the case of water. A planet where there will be increasing mobility, number of cars, and more roads. The development pattern that we need to follow will need to be a development pattern that looks at how to preserve the resources today in order to provide more opportunities tomorrow. So the role of the international institutions is that of helping countries and people to, by sharing information and best practices, to design their own vision for the future, making their own decisions on the investments to prioritize and implement those, and also help them identify the resources that would be needed to implement these visions and plans. But crafting a vision for a greener and more resource-efficient world implies shifting the paradigm from greening investment into greening economies. That is extremely important. If that does not happen, then the old discussion will be about patches here and there. So we need to work very closely and all together at greening the economies. There are certain things that can be done already from now. First of all, adopting carbon taxes that can mitigate climate change and, along with green bonds, boost revenues to invest in green initiatives. In North Macedonia, we estimated that a higher carbon price in line with the projected EU ETS price could increase the revenues in 2030 by over 30 billion Macedonian dinars and reduce annual CO2 emissions by as much as 65% compared to business as usual. The second thing that we could do right away is to mobilize resources from the private sector through an effective and transparent regulatory framework, improving the taxation system, and providing the financial sector with the ammunition to be able to invest. The third thing is to stimulate investments in green infrastructure, climate-smart technologies, and renewable energy generation, because the multiplier effect associated to these kind of interventions is 2 to 3 times as much as investing in fossil fuels. We have several examples: greening the transport sector, energy using energy more efficiently, investing in energy efficiency. All these are smart investments that contribute to address the environmental issues, help create local jobs, and reduce emissions. So all the incentives are there internationally. We have all the conventions, the Paris Convention, the EU Green Deal, the Green Agenda for the Western Balkans, you name it. The adoption of more ambitious NDCs for North Macedonia is indeed a very good news, and it's the news that we would want to hear from more and more countries. But the recovery cannot just be green. The recovery needs to be just and needs to address the issues of those that are left behind. Usually, issues with climate change affect the poor disproportionately, and also the adoption of green climate policies affect them disproportionately. The Gilets jaunes in France, in Ecuador, all these movements show that we need to involve all the stakeholders in the design and implementation of just transition policies, and strong communication campaign to bring everybody on board. So our role as international institutions is to have our own framework to invest, and at the World Bank we have the Climate Change Action Plan, but also to provide countries and people with the instruments to be responsible of their own green future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paolucci. Much appreciated sticking time. Now we come to His Excellency Mr. Nasser Noureddini, Minister of Environment and Physical Planning. The floor is yours, Minister.
Thank you, Professor. I can't promise I will stay within the time frame. Apologies. Environment doesn't get to be heard that often at finance forums, so we'll try to change that. Dear colleagues, dear participants, when I first got the invitation, and my idea was, considering my background in banking, was to prepare a concrete speech presenting financial models of socially responsible green investments, etc., etc. However, though, knowing that we will have a lot of IFIs here, my dear colleague from Economy, Mr. Bekteshi also being here, I was sure they're going to speak about that as well. However, though, I got back this morning from the World Nature Conservation Congress of IUCN in Marseille, and where I got to hear and discuss with a lot of colleagues from across the world, and executive directors from GEF and GCF, as well as some world leaders were there, talking about a different aspect. As Mr. Gentiloni mentioned, our NDC is quite strong, very promising, and it's feasible, which is the most important part. We just recently passed the long-term climate action strategy. However, what I realized at that Congress was the necessity to discuss why it pays off to invest in mitigation and adaptation in regards to climate change, as well as why it is crucial to secure a nature-positive COVID-19 economic recovery, and discuss that at a forum like this, where finance and economy are the key topics. While we are all waiting for the green transformation, believing that the technological shift is what we need, the truth is it is already here, staring us in the face. But what we are all waiting for is the political shift. To start with, sustainable development requests long-term planning, which sounds challenging to politicians, because we generally feel constrained within our mandates, and we need quick deliverables. One could easily compare this to an investment fund manager who needs to have positive quarterly reports for the shareholders. And this is how we fall into short-term investments where we believe we will have quick gains that usually implies supporting the economic growth we believe globally needs to be above 2%, and expect that by the end of the 21st century, we will be rich enough and smart enough to solve any environmental challenge we face. However, I believe there's a fundamental flaw to this argument, and that is that the time value on that option is a lot shorter than calculated in the financial models. Hence why, even though we started talking about climate change back in the 70s, continued in the 90s, louder in the 2000s, we must honestly admit we have not taken the appropriate actions. The biodiversity and climate crisis will affect our economy in the very near future, if it already hasn't. Terms such as nature-based solutions and nature-positive investments sound distant to the majority of the people and usually implies to them as a cost rather than an investment. However, we have been witnessing extreme weather events across the world, to mention a few: floods in Europe, fires in our own country and the whole region. Therefore, investing in mitigation is actually an investment that will have a long-term return and prepare us better for these events in the future. Moreover, investment in adaptation is a precondition for a normal, functioning society in the very near future. And when I say that, I'm talking about proper, resilient infrastructure, improved and efficient agricultural methods, and planned land use and spatial planning, protection of our water sources, etc. The cost, should we want to call it like that, in mitigating flash floods financially far outweigh the cost of damages they can result in, let alone the potential loss of life or the potential loss of the private investor's assets, if you want to look at it from a financial aspect. I'll take an example that we have right here in front of us, Vodno. In the 60s, there was a huge flood in Skopje, and Vodno was just a mountain. And a nature-based solution was to plant trees on it. An investment that has actually saved lives in the long run, saved our assets as well, and saved the city of Skopje. What we need to do at forums like these is not only to speak among ourselves, rather relay a message to the citizens, and especially the private sector. We need to demystify the words green investments and energy efficiency. The message needs to be very simple and straightforward, that these investments have longevity and save costs in the medium and long run. As well, I as a Minister of Environment need to bring closer to you the concept of nature-positive investments. As an example of that is the proclamation of protected areas in our country. Over the last 2 years, one of my priorities has been the proclamation of protected areas. We have increased the protected areas on our territory from 8.9% to 13.3%. One of them being the proclamation of the new National Park Chara. Not only do we protect our nature and have a healthy environment for our citizens, at the same time, we're creating new socio-economic opportunities for our citizens. Because we need to be realistic. We will not be an industrial powerhouse. The great thing about that is that we don't need to be one. Our future lies in the service-based industry. We have an abundance of natural treasuries, such as the Ocherd Lake, to name one among many, and mountains that we can use in summer as well as in the winter, for ecotourism, organic farming, and many other activities. These are and will continue to create further sustainable green jobs. To conclude, the same way the Fridays for Future are requesting a change in policies from the governments, these same consumers are raising the expectations for the private sector as well. And as a parent, I feel obliged to highlight the fact that we are speaking about our children's future, and if we don't take the appropriate actions, our generation is the one we blame tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll come back to some of these issues. Our next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Yeton Shachiri, Minister of Information, Society and Administration. Please.
Thank you, Professor Hashi. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, panel members, firstly, I want to thank the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Bersimi, for organizing this important event. Thank you for having me in this panel, where we are sharing ideas and elaborating plans on green and smart economy. The COVID-19 crisis and planned recovery measures to build back better have highlighted the important role that digital technologies can play in increasing and resilience of our economics and society. Digital technologies also have the potential to help address many of the root causes of current interconnected global crises, including climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. The digital economy is booming. It is the fact that during the pandemic, the only business sector that showed growth in North Macedonia was the IT sector. It kept growing and kept hiring people during this period of time. We as a ministry, with the full cooperation with the government of the Republic of North Macedonia, have set our objectives on the digitalization process of the country. We aim to introduce further measures to help the IT sector, so it can continue its growth without any obstacles. Our goal is that by the end of 2030, there should be 25,000 employees in this sector compared to the 30,000 currently employers. We are also encouraging students to study in the ICT sector. Our goal is that 4% of graduates to be from this sector, 2 times more than in 2020. We plan to invest more in our digital infrastructure. Until the end of this year, 99% of households will be covered with 4G signal. 83% of them will be covered with the fast broadband signal, compared with 78% from the previous years. By the end of 2023, we will have a list on city coverage with 5G signal completely. All the main passages will be covered with 5G signal by the end of 2025, and more than half of households will have leased internet connections of 100 megabit per second with the possibility for gigabit to connection. We will secure an internet connection of 1 gigabit per second for all public institutions by 2029. We have recently taken concrete steps in creating a new institution dedicated to digitalization. With this, we aim to give a big input to the digitalization process in the country, building a government data center that puts together all government research, hardware and softwares in one central place, more cost efficient in terms of security, maintenance, optimization of research and energy consumptions. Regarding digitalization, the green economy, the Ministry of Information Society and Administration is implementing the project document management system with the goal of interconnect as many public institutions as possible in this system. Through this system, we will shorten the processing time of documents and reduce the use of paper. Institutions will contact each other only through this system for the short period of the time. This will include all central level institutions, government, and all local government institutions. We have also started the process of digitalization of the public service through the national portal of e-service. Our goal is to have 95% of all main public service online by 2030, compared to 151 service in 2020. Our citizens will have access on their electronic medical record, and 80% of them will use digital ID solutions by 2030. To conclude in my speech, I will say that we as the government and the minister are on the right track towards digitalization and the development of the green economy. We are in front of many projects launched which we will certainly carry to the end without hesitation. We will continue further support the IT sector in the country in order to promote the development and growth of this sector. We will invest in education of our citizens so that we have as resource qualified staff to offer to this sector. The future of the country is undoubtedly digital and green. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. We now go to His Excellency Mr. Aryanit Hoja, Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Water Management, one of the areas most directly related to climate change and its consequences. Please, Minister.
Thank you, Professor. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, respected colleagues, it is clear to all of us that the future of humanity depends on the quality of the environment. And it is not just a phrase. These are the words with a great weight and great responsibility for all of us. Food security, safety, availability, and quality are the basic needs for the survival of mankind. The ongoing global pandemic of coronavirus have proved the crucial importance of the food production. Food system has been challenged worldwide, but never stopped, providing products that are essential for daily life. And it is the production that is most strongly exposed and vulnerable to climate change. The green economy is the only solution that provides prosperity. Everything else will lead to self-destruction. Raising awareness of the importance of the environment, the application of ecological agricultural practice, the use of energy from renewable sources, efficient management of water resources, application of innovative solutions, digitalization, and many other activities are the basic for moving towards a green economy. Sustainable food system that provides healthy food is one of the high priorities of our country. Agriculture is one of the key sectors of our economy, an important employer in rural areas. The Republic of North Macedonia has soil and climate conditions suitable for production of food of excellent quality, and agriculture is an economic branch with a strong potential for sustainable development. Agriculture is among the key sectors that are particularly sensitive to extreme weather conditions and disaster, primarily because of agricultural activities are mainly carried out in the open and are directly dependent on the climate conditions. Through damage to the agricultural production, climate change is affecting rural livelihoods and food security. The vulnerability of the agriculture sector is further driven by insufficient economic development in rural areas, depopulation of rural areas, aging of the rural population, limited access to the finance for the rural population, etc. Improving the competitiveness and sustainability of the agriculture holds the application of environmental production practices that lead to reducing the impact of the adaptation to climate change, as well as ensuring sustainable development of rural areas, is in compliance with the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN and with European Union standards are the key goals that the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Water Economy will strive for. This is our strategic goal set in the National Strategy for Agriculture and Rural Development 2021-27, which we plan to achieve with the support from our international partners and friends. In our last sectorial analysis and consultation, we concluded that to improve agricultural resilience to the effects of the climate change, the starting point should be to increase the level of knowledge and education of agricultural producers, increase research and innovation capacity, and strengthening the system for transferring modern knowledge to agriculture holdings. Investments in modern production technology and the introduction of digitalization in agriculture are one of the key changes that will secure faster agriculture development. In that direction, the Ministry, together with the Fund for Innovation and Technology Development, realized a public call for digitalization and agriculture. The interest was great. 38 companies applied, a figure that is encouraging as speaks of the interest of the agribusiness. In addition, IPART funds greatly support the modernization of agriculture and contribute to the stronger competitiveness of the agriculture sector. Through special measures, the private sector is enabling to grow, while developing environmentally friendly production and using renewable energy in this direction of sustainable development. The projects we are implementing with the support of FAO are also aimed at the sustainable development. These projects are being implemented for the first time in the history of the country. In 7 areas in the country, land consolidation projects have been launched, and in the village of Egri, the construction of agriculture infrastructure worth about 500,000 euros began this summer. Investment including construction of drainage canals, expansion of the existing irrigation system, and construction of paved roads in the village of Egri. All active consolidation projects cover more than 2,500 farmers, landowners, and about 3,000 hectares of agricultural land. This land reform is extremely important and will contribute to solving one of the biggest agricultural problems in the country, the fragmentation of the agricultural land, which are difficult to cultivate. With the support of FAO, Ministry began to prepare the first national strategy for the irrigation and drainage for the period of 2021-2023. Also, Ministry of Agriculture pays special attention to the development of energy efficiency project in the field of agriculture. Because of the time, I will conclude that I will underline our commitment to mitigating the effects of climate change, thereby contributing to reduce the negative impact of the economy and overall livelihoods, and making the agriculture sector as vulnerable as other sectors. This is no greater sorrow for a farmer that when he sees all the labor destroyed by a natural disease. Therefore, the responsibility for the stable future of our society is is in our hand, and we must do everything to achieve that goal. I believe that the efficient multi-sectoral approach and knowledge based on agriculture be commitment to successfully implemented activities in the future according to the climate change. Our task in the future is to further strengthen the green economy, because many natural disasters have recently reminded us that climate, health and economy are highly competitive. The ministry is making serious efforts to modernize agriculture that will be more resistant to climate change. There is no modern agriculture without adaptation to climate change, and without them there is no green economy. I sincerely hope that this economic forum will have a strong impact on all of us and will raise awareness in the fight we are all together. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now we come back to international partners again. Ms. Olga Skolskaya, who's the head of Europe and Central Asia Division of MIGA, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency of the World Bank. Please, Olga.
Thank you, Professor Hashi, and good afternoon, Your Excellencies, colleagues and partners. First of all, I would like to thank Minister Bissimi and his team for having MIGA at this important and timely event. And it's timely, as we have heard today and yesterday, given the ambitious investment plan, intervention plan that the government is proposing. We have heard from my colleagues Massimiliano and Ari about how the World Bank and IFC can support the government priorities. And now I will try to explain how MIGA guarantees and in particular credit enhancement solutions could play an important role in supporting the investment intervention plan for both public and private sector projects. First of all, climate is obviously a very important strategic priority area for MIGA, as for all of us, as we have been just discussing. And for MIGA in particular, we aim to reach 35% of our annual guarantee issuance in support of green projects, and have all our projects Paris aligned, real sector projects Paris aligned by 2023. So I will speak about how MIGA, together with partners, projects in key climate change action areas of the World Bank Group. So in the interest of time, I will focus on three areas: renewable energy, sustainable transport, and smart, resilient cities. These are also areas where large and complex projects take place, and where private sector financing and know-how can be critical for success. First of all, the renewable energy. So what could be MIGA's role in supporting renewable energy projects? MIGA's breach of contract coverage is a valuable tool for credit enhancing long-term payment obligations of state-owned off-takers or other public entities whose contractual obligations are key for projects' viability and success. And here's an important point, and I think that picks up on something that was mentioned yesterday about the issuance of project bonds and green bonds. MIGA's breach of contract coverage, especially when combined with credit enhancement solutions of other IFIs, can bring projects and project bonds to investment grade, increasing the pool of investors, leading to more competition and more advantageous financing terms. And we have examples of that, including in the region. So in a number of renewable energy projects, in particular large and complex, MIGA has worked with IFC and with the World Bank, and combining our products. And also in the region, we are partnering with EBRD and working on some excellent opportunities. So hopefully we will see some of that in North Macedonia as well. Second point, transport and climate resilient infrastructure. Both are very important sources, obviously, of climate mitigation, but also of climate adaptation. As, again, a number of speakers have mentioned, the tragic events of this summer have reminded us how vulnerable infrastructure is to effects of climate change. So MIGA has supported metro, tramway, road construction and rehabilitation, ports and airports. Some of these projects were structured through PPPs or SPPPs, and some were purely public sector projects. In PPP structures, MIGA provided breach of contract coverage, and in public sector projects, MIGA provided its comprehensive coverage, which is a Basel-compliant credit risk mitigation instrument. That resulted in a very significant interest from commercial financiers, very competitive financing terms and long tenors. Just to give you an example from the region, we're currently working on a project in Serbia. It's a motorway project which will connect central Serbia with two pan-European corridors. This is a large project, and it has a very important adaptation benefit in that it has flood mitigation features and to make the motorway more resilient. And this is clearly an important topic for most countries in this region in particular. And finally, smart cities. So MIGA has been supporting the building of resilient and climate-smart cities by providing coverage for green buildings, including health facilities, waste management, urban transportation projects, energy-efficient street lighting, among others. This is clearly a cluster of potential projects and sort of goes towards greening the sector and the economy rather than individual sort of standalone projects. And just to give again a few examples to illustrate of how this could work. Several years ago, IFC, BRD, and MIGA have partnered to support a very large healthcare PPP in Turkey, which has been a source of very important lessons on PPPs and what is needed for success. One of the projects, in fact, was a hospital project, was LEED certified and as such a green project, and it was financed through an international bond issue, which was rated 2 notches above the sovereign at that time and actually held up very well during the subsequent downgrade. So again, very impactful and transformative project. And another example from the region is a waste-to-energy project in Belgrade, which is a path-breaking municipal PPP, which IFC has helped to structure through a long-term engagement. And MIGA's cover was essential for attracting a large number of strong international bidders and resulting in a strong, structured project. So, and comprehensive cover has helped a number of municipalities. Turkey is a good example, Izmir, Istanbul, to finance metro and tramway projects. So, in conclusion, there is an urgent need to scale up mitigation projects and to ensure that everything that is built green and better, and obviously climate resilience. There are many good examples that the international organizations and partners can draw upon from our work in other countries and other regions, and partnerships especially important for large and complex projects. So let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sklovskaya. Thank you. Our last presenter in the first round is Ms. Narine Sahakian, who's resident representative of UNDP in North Macedonia. Please, Ms. Sahakian.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Hashi, dear panel members, dear colleagues, dear participants. Let me also start with thanking Minister Beşimi and his team for great organization of the event and for the invitation to be part of. I'm particularly thankful for this opportunity to be part of this specific panel because digitalization and the green economy are at the core of UNDP's effort to support countries in the recovery from pandemic. For the next 5 years, UNDP strategic plan, which was adopted only last week by the Executive Board, formulates the main purpose of the organization as supporting 3 directions of change. And the first direction is the structural transformation towards green, inclusive, and digital transitions, together with other 2 to not leave anyone behind and building resilience in the face of systemic uncertainty and risk. If there is one lesson we should learn from the pandemic, that is that business as usual is no more an option. When the term new normal was first coined, it was in relation with to the world adjusting long months of lockdowns, the mandates to wearing masks, increased public health awareness. Now, when most of us already adjusted to the life during the pandemic, we still need to work together to define what the new normal will be beyond the pandemic. It is precisely here where the UNDP sees digitalization and environmentally sustainable economies as a crucial pillars. I would like to refer to the latest report of Intergovernmental Board on Climate Change, which delivered the most alarming findings. And I will bring only a couple of them. According to the report, the last decade was hotter than any period in human history. And the link between extreme weather events and human-made climate change is clearer than ever. The report findings are a strong warning of what will happen to the life in our planet if we do not act to transform our economies immediately. And then no country, doesn't matter rich or poor, small or big in terms of contributing to global greenhouse gas emissions, will be spared from the consequences of climate change. This is why UNDP has prioritized green recovery as key direction of support in every country we work. I'm happy to say that North Macedonia has made very important steps towards such recovery. As Minister Nureddini mentioned, and also a number of our speakers already, country renewed its national climate pledge to UN Framework Convention to Climate Change with an ambitious commitment of 82% reduction in net greenhouse gas emissions in 2030 comparing with the 1990. There is one important aspect I would like to invite your attention, that the pledges under the Paris Agreement are not just about the climate. They present a national roadmap for investments across key sectors that can drive green recovery. According to our estimates, reaching targets necessary for achieving the enhanced NDCs will require huge amount, 20 billion euros in capital investment. But we all need to be realistic. Only about 4% can be covered successfully only by the government funds. 54% will require mixed form of financing, and 72% will depend on other sources of financing. I'm therefore really happy to see international finance institutions and commercial banks are increasingly recognizing the importance of targeting energy efficiency and renewable energy businesses, and have started to actively support such projects also for small and medium enterprises and for residential customers. This is a trend we hope to accelerate with our new joint project we will implement with the EBRD, Government of North Macedonia, and a number of local commercial banks, and that will be supported with the SDG fund. Around 30 million USD has been already pledged from financial institutions, and project is competing globally for the SDG fund grant resources. We find it extremely important to ensure that the availability of green financing is not a bottleneck in the greening of the economy. And let me finish this part of my intervention by stating that the UNDP eagerly supported these efforts through our Global Climate Promise initiative and the locally implemented projects, and we will continue supporting North Macedonia in living up to its ambitious climate targets through our diverse portfolio of projects, covering from air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions reduction to increasing the resilience of infrastructure and public sector systems to deal with the impact of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sarkian. Okay, we have a little time left. I would like to go round again and ask the participants in the panel to make a final comment, but particularly say something about what do we do about those who are left behind? How do we ensure shared prosperity and inclusiveness? Mr. Hilbert, would you like to make a short comment, a couple of minutes?
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
Please.
Yes. Yes, this is, I think, an increasingly important element of what we are currently engaged in, because what we have seen is that in this crisis, and actually also already before, there is an increasing inequality developing. Different groups are hit in different ways by what is happening, and rather than bringing this together, it actually pulls groups within the society apart. And it's very much also an objective of our managing director, Kristalina Georgieva, to ask countries to pay attention to that aspect, to pay attention to the distributional impact of the financial and climate and COVID crises, and also to look at the distributional impact of the policy response to those crises, because both can lead to increasing inequality. And the problem with increasing inequality is that it damages the support for the measures. And that is crucial. It is crucial that we gather sufficient support in our member countries for the necessary policy reactions to the various crises. And therefore we need to pay attention to this inequality aspects and to the inclusion dimension of all our policies. So very much something that the fund is looking into, very much a point of attention, and very much also something for national authorities to look into and take into account when they consider the responses to the circumstances. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hilberts. Much appreciated. We come to Mr. Paolucci. Please, how do we stop people being left behind? How do policies encourage shared prosperity?
Thank you very much. I think my answer will be two-pronged. On the one hand, I'd like to highlight that making sure that everyone is included in these reforms is not just a moral imperative, it's smart economics. It is extremely important to have everyone on board. These are difficult reforms. These are reforms that may seem easy to implement, may seem trendy, but they're difficult because they affect people's lives, rights, and in some cases, livelihoods. So just transition needs to be fair, just transition needs to be inclusive, just transition needs to be owned. And that's the second part of my answer. These interventions require well thought through strategies, conceived by the government in consultation and with the participation of all actors, from civil society organizations, private sectors, international actors. These are reforms that needs to be owned and need to be implemented over time. It is difficult to implement these reforms within one political cycle, and some of these reforms are very difficult to implement and not very popular, but they need to start, because as Minister Noureddini said, otherwise we as a generation will be blamed now, will be blamed in the future for the lack of action right now. Last thing that I wanted to mention is that it is important when we think about these reforms that there are inevitably, if we want to protect the poorest, there are some reforms that imply payment of subsidies, payment of support schemes to the poor. These are costly, but at one point, these are necessary, time-bound, but necessary. And this is how I would like to conclude. It's smart economics, and it will pay off over time. But the cost along the road need to be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister Noureddini, you mentioned, of course, the intergenerational problems, but within the generation, how do we make sure that people are not left behind as a result of these policies?
Thank you, Professor. First of all, let me, before I get my proposed increased budget declined, I would also like to thank the Minister of Finance. I forgot to do that earlier. I'd like to thank him as well. We're a country in transition, Professor. We are actually, no one left behind, we're actually in a different stage when we look at it than the developed countries. Now, from the developed countries' perspective, of course, they see it as not leaving the developing countries and the developed countries behind. From our perspective as a country, unfortunately, we still have to actually admit that we have not invested sufficiently in drinking water, wastewater, solid waste management in the past. So when we're speaking about not leaving anyone behind, the question is what have we done so far and where do we need to concentrate tomorrow? So hence when we're all speaking about the green economy or the economy of tomorrow, post-COVID-19, yes, we have had an economic hit, hence why the priorities of our country, the capital investments need to be made in infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, we're talking about wastewater treatment plants, solid waste management. These are all labor-intensive jobs that will be creating jobs for our citizens. At the same time, we'll be investing in projects that will be bettering the life of the standard of living of our citizens, something that we shouldn't be speaking about in the 21st century. But unfortunately, it is the reality we face, hence why we have, as I said earlier, we've got an increased budget proposal to the Ministry of Finance, but at the same time, we're working closely together with IFIs. It is not possible for a country like ours, with the capital investment capacity we have, to achieve these standards, first of all. Second of all, to, at the same time, create these new jobs. Together with EIB, we're working on a loan for water projects. Together with EBRD, we're also working on a loan for waste management. I believe when we're looking at them not leaving anyone behind in our country, we need to invest appropriately across the country, because we constantly are speaking about one society. However, I think the Minister of Finance will probably inform you as well that these changes in policies of the fiscal taxation and decentralization of that. I think these are the changes, the policies we need to make as a country. Concentrate on where we haven't done sufficiently and call it the green economy. It is the green economy. We're talking about basic infrastructure, which has longevity, which stops from polluting our rivers, which stops from polluting our soils, and in the short term creates the green jobs we're speaking about. In the long run, I think we need to include all our citizens in the protected areas we're speaking about, because these are the jobs of the long run, the medium to long run.
Thank you. Thank you. Minister Shaqiri, please, would you like to make a comment about how do we ensure that, for example, people in rural areas have access to internet? How do we prevent internet poverty as part of your plans?
Thank you. I will answer in Albanian.
I heard carefully all the previous speakers, and I will try to respond regarding the importance of digitalization in rural areas or urban areas. Previously, certain priorities have been important priorities for our country, but lately, as a trend and as a necessity, it is mentioned the investment in infrastructure and digitalization. These processes that are very crucial for us, because as I emphasized, it is a necessity, because if we are not careful with the time, the connection and interconnection with different sectors and institutions will present a necessity for us as a country to invest in the infrastructure of digitalization. So far, we have tried, as I mentioned previously, the data in our country, the whole country to be covered with internet. Remains just a little to complete the mission and cover the whole country, but the necessity requires in the next time frame to follow the trend, meaning 5G, that will cover almost all our country in a certain period. As digitalization is successful, we will have a better smart economy, and we will be closer to citizens to have a green economy, because digitalization will decrease other expenses that already exist. We have provided for the next period cooperation with local institutions to have as more services as possible in rural areas as well. Thank you.
Very much, Minister. And we come to Minister Hoxha, who is responsible for agriculture. And you already have rural poverty. And how do your policies hopefully prevent further increase in rural poverty?
Thank you. As my colleague Minister Nureddini mentioned, that analyses have been done long years ago. Now is the time for acting, not only on the decreasing the poorness on the rural areas, but also on accommodating on the climate change and everything that has to be done. As a ministry, we are working on different steps on how to implement policies that, first of all, will make agriculture according to the needs of the climate change. The second thing is that we as a country have a lot of potential in the rural areas to get not only economic growth in these areas and keep the people in these local areas, but also we have a potential to make additional values as a country to offer and to keep the economic growth on the rural areas. We are supporting as a government, as a ministry, through rural programs in the Agency for Financial Support of the Agriculture and Rural Development. And of course that, as I mentioned in the beginning, we are trying to see on two different ways. First, to offer to the agriculture or to the producer the infrastructure, which we are doing by investing in the capital investments on the dams irrigation system, making modern irrigation systems. And the other issue, which we are trying also to put by IPART 3 now, which we will have, of course, more funds to offer the diversification of the farms, which will impact directly the rural areas and making them use these funds and trying to be more competitive. And of course, helping the general economy of the country to grow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll come to Ms. Sklovskaya. Please, if you could comment on how do you encourage, particularly when you have participation of private sector, how you encourage them to have policies and projects which also contribute to reduction in poverty and prevent further larger number of people being left behind?
Thank you, Professor Hashi. That's an interesting question. We do look at every project in MIGA through the lens of the project either contributing to shared prosperity or reducing poverty, depending obviously on the region and the country. And whenever possible, we encourage the investors by requiring them, speaking in particular about green and smart economy. First of all, projects have to comply with the World Bank and MIGA environmental and social requirement standards, and then this in and of itself is already a contribution to important development objectives, which immediately and more importantly over time will contribute to the development objectives of the country. I think in this regard, I would also say that from the investors' side, we see enormous interest in investing in green projects, both sort of traditional sponsors, commercial banks, but also institutional investors. And what we're hearing is they would like to see sort of larger pipelines of projects, and again, drawing on what our colleagues at IFC are doing, at the work that EBRD and other IFIs are doing, as much as possible, we would like to support projects working with the governments and with private sector partners to structure them, to help them be structured in a way that makes them climate resilient and also bring important mitigation benefits. And financing is available, and help is available from some of the trust funds. There are funds obviously in our organizations, but also entities like a global infrastructure, a facility housed within the World Bank that can fund important environmental studies, can help obtain the ratings, anything that prevents an important project from moving ahead. So I think it's important to take advantage of all of this advice and opportunities to structure projects that obviously are attractive for investors, but fulfill very important developmental objectives of the country.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Sahakian, you're the last colleague to speak. Please, UNDP, of course, has concern for Human Development Index and all their contribution there. How do we ensure inclusiveness in your projects, plans?
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. I know I'm speaking being the last speaker and standing between the session and the lunch is not the best position, but I will try to be very brief. As I already mentioned, leaving no one behind is one of the main directions of UNDP operation in any country, globally, regionally, country level. So it doesn't matter in which sector we are working. This is one of the main goals of any our intervention and project. But I would like to respond to your question using the digitalization angle. So, even before pandemic, we all were seeing the clear benefits digitalization can bring. When it's in relation to increased productivity, efficiency, increased transparency, access to goods and services. But what pandemic demonstrated, that there are new opportunities, new trends digitalization can bring. And that was a wake-up call for governments, private sector, and organizations to be ready, to prepare themselves and to have a plan to deal with the disruptions. And that was also watershed moment we are entering in the fast-track accelerated digitalization period. In relation to all this, I would like for all of us who is dealing with digitalization, planning or implementing, to always remember at least three main aspects. We were talking about that digitalization is an enabler, and the pandemic really demonstrated that when it helped the government and private sector to ensure continuity of their businesses, our businesses. But we need to remember also that that can be also the barrier. And here I'm coming to leave no one behind. Because if we will not plan the digitalization, which comes to our life and entering any sphere of our life, it's a health sector, education, service provision, at the local level, in the remote areas, if we will not plan that will properly and ensuring the just benefits for all people and all groups in the society, we may end up in increased inequality and further digital divide in the society. So this is a very important aspect, we all need to remember. And the last thing, we need to consider digitalization as an accelerator, as I already mentioned. And if we will manage to bring all people left behind around, on the board, then we will ensure the much accelerated human development and the benefits for all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. May I just spend a couple of minutes try to sum up or draw a few points from discussion of various colleagues. It is clear that the government of Macedonia has the two important pillars of green economy and digitalization agenda in its programs. Ministers explained how in their departments they're making plans, and colleagues from the Commissioner Gentiloni to others, colleagues from international institutions, also explained how their plans support both the green agenda and the digitalization agenda of the Macedonian government. But there is something which is important, and that is the joined-up thinking about this. Clearly, Ministry of Environment is concerned about this. But is Ministry of Defense also on board? Is Ministry of Interior on board? And that's really the important thing, how all ministries should be on board with both green agenda and digitalization agenda. The benefits of digitalization have, of course, as Ms. Sarkian pointed out, has been shown in the course of pandemic. But at the same time, it was also shown that those who don't have access to internet and don't have access to digital knowledge would be left behind. And in a country like Macedonia with a large, with important agricultural sector and large number of people in rural areas, this becomes a major challenge, how to make sure that they're included in the development. But it was clearly pointed out that really green economy and green policies, we don't have any option except thinking about it. Otherwise, the next generation would blame us. I'd like to stop at this point and thank all members of the panel and colleagues who are not here, like Mr. Hilbers, and thank you very much, colleagues.